Hi, everyone. I'm Dick Halley, and I'm here to share with you a few thoughts about what you might do to increase your capacity to understand what other people are trying to say to you. There are two overarching ideas, imperatives even, that I want to share with you first. The first is there's nothing that anything I tell you today is going to be of any help unless you can come to a place where you feel compassion with the person you're listening to. You've got to spend some time developing your capacity to be compassionate. The second thing is that you've got to be certain that you want to understand what that person is saying. You've got to develop a really strong desire for different points of view. These take a lot of time to develop, really. But without them, any skill you develop will be far less effective. What it requires is that while you're trying to listen, you've got to catch yourself going, oh, I'm not feeling that compassionate right now, and see if you can adjust that sense. And you've got to catch yourself realizing, yeah, I'm getting off of really trying to get where this person's coming from, and try to adjust that for yourself. In order to get started with this, though, what I want to do is share with you my model of listening. And the reason is so that you can see where these ideas that I'm going to share fit into the process of listening. Okay, so let me share that with you. I've got to take a second to get this up for you. Here's our opening slide. And we've got to go to this. Okay. If you look in the area with the blue circle, this is what many researchers refer to now as working memory. And these are some of the things that you can learn to do something about. Anyway, you collect everything constantly. There's way, way, way too much to be aware of. And therefore, there's a process of selecting, and what you become aware of is those things that you select. This is heavily driven by probability, and I'll explain that in a little bit. And then the things that you select, you organize. You organize them into patterns you recognize, and you organize them into things that seem to hold together. Those things that you recognize, you go to the next step, and that's assigning meaning, or you hunt for meaning if you don't have something immediately. What we're talking about here is you come to a perception. And this is affected by what was selected and how it was organized in an enormous list of affecting variables. Still essentially a mathematical probability. Checking fit is an attempt to be sure of the assigned meaning. And we'll spend some time on that in a little bit. The green line, facilitating behaviors. This takes advantage of checking fit and is your attempt to assist the speaker in conveying the meaning they'd like you to understand. Let's take a look at those affecting variables then. The list is long. Your experience, your values, your attitudes, your education, the vocabulary you develop, perspectives and paradigms that you develop, your religious experiences, your religious orientations, your political orientations, the ideas you have about group membership. Are there groups you like and dislike, religions you like and dislike, perspectives you like and dislike, your memories and imaginations, and your plans, hopes and dreams. And I'm sure you can add a lot of things here. So let's look at the first area that you can develop to affect your understanding. First and foremost, get new and different experiences. The reason you want to do this is it changes the probability about what things will happen. I've talked about probabilities of what gets selected or organized in the meetings you assign. These probabilities come from all of that affecting variables. Literally, it is a mathematical model, and what it means is you will select you will select something that supports a meaning that you expect to occur at the level that you expect it. So if it's only 40% expected to occur, then only 40% of the time will you come up with that. If it's 80% of the time, well, 80% of the time you'll come up with that. And it's very important to understand that this probability stuff is really, really important to you, because without it, you couldn't listen very well at all. And that's because much of what you listen to comes too fast. So one of the advantages you have is that most languages, certainly the one I work in the English language, is highly predictable. And I mean, the probabilities of something occurring. So, you know, if you are reading a book, for example, and you come to the end of a page and it's not the end of a sentence, try playing the game of guessing what the next word is on the next page. I'll bet you that a large percentage of the time, you can guess what that word will be, or at least you can guess the kind of word it will be. That's important to know, because if you don't have that going on, you'd be lost. You'd have to stop and check to see what the meaning was with everything the person said. You don't have time to do that. So the other things you can do here, explore your values and your attitudes. Try to develop. Try to become more sophisticated. Oh, and read. Read extensively and in new areas. That gives you new perspectives. That gives you new information. That gives you new vocabulary. Okay. Learn about groups, religions, perspectives different from your own. That's part of the reading thing, I suppose, but it's also part of getting new experiences. One of the things I've done with my students, for example, most of them drove to school. And so, and most of them knew where their next meal was going to come from without too much trouble. I encourage them to ride the bus and talk to people on the bus, find out what it's like for them to get around in the world. I encourage them to shadow a person who's on food stamps and see if they can get a sense of what it's like. What's it feel like to hand food stamps to the checker at the grocery store when there are people standing there watching that are going to pay with money and you know it? can't be the same kind of experience that these students had in their normal days. Engage your imagination and learn to expand it. Oh my, play in your mind. Learn to look for something that is unusual, different in what the person's trying to talk about. Develop plans for your life. Be willing to dream and hope. These kinds of things expand what you have the capacity to suspect that a person means as they're trying to talk with you. And the more that you develop those kinds of things, the better chance you have of being able to assign meanings that come closer to being what the person intends. Second area I want to talk about is learn to keep your own emotions intact. If you're experiencing significant emotions of your own, it's not likely, that you're going to be able to listen at an optimal level. Are you going to listen to something where there's a likelihood that your emotions will get triggered by something the person says? You've got to be ready to be able to let that just be okay. Here's some books that help. I don't have time to really talk about this in this whole presentation extensively. One that helps me is Help Yourself to Happiness, Rational Self-Counseling. That's a book by Maxie Maultsby. And another one I find extremely helpful is The Heartmath Solution by Childre. The original book is a lot better than the current website because they're trying to make money off the current website, and it's not Doc doing it anymore. And the third area, a picture understanding. Here we come to my fun new word, checking fit. You've got to assume that you cannot have the same meaning space as others. I mean, you'll have part of it, but you won't have it all. And this is because you don't have the same experiences. Nothing about what drives your expectations for what meaning is for words and so forth is going to be exactly the same as someone else's. There'll be overlap, of course. I'd like to share this little diagram. I don't know whether you're familiar with Venn diagrams, but the purple and green things are Venn diagrams in my mind. And what I want them to represent is, one represents the meaning space of what the speaker says and to the listener, and the other represents the meaning space for what the speaker says, the speaker's meaning space. Now, the listener doesn't know where or how large the shared meaning space is. So they could be overlapped quite a little bit, and then the odds might be pretty good that at least something in there is part of what that speaker is trying to get to you. However, the truth is, you do not know where in that speaker's meaning space they're paying attention, and you have no idea whether or not that particular meaning space overlaps with anything that you would tend to associate with that word or phrase. That's why checking fit becomes so very, very imperative. So, checking fit. You've got to ask yourself, is the assigned meaning the best you can do? Now you know that you don't have it all. So the question becomes, what can you do to be sure or have a better idea of whether or not the meaning that is in your head is anything close to the meaning that's in the other person's head. Of course, a lot of the time you've got to assume that it is, because that's the way the world works, and it goes very fast. You know, if somebody asks you if you want a sandwich, you should understand that, yeah, they're asking if I want a sandwich, and I need to say yes or no. But if you're listening to somebody talk about something that is important to them and they're trying to explain what it's like to have that experience, we want to know, how well does your assigned meaning fit with what you've already heard? You might be missing part of that meaning. Of course you are. You might be attending to more of the possible meaning than was intended. Do you have a clear idea where that message is going? Well, maybe you do and maybe you don't. Can you think of possible alternative meanings? If so, be sure that you don't let it trap you into not checking. You know, if you think you're pretty sure. Search that big memory of yours for possible alternative meanings. And let your imagination look for alternative meanings. Now, this has to happen very, very fast. The question is, what do you do with this? Well, one of the things I want you to be thinking about is, I'd like you to be working towards being surprised by what you learn. You could learn an experience that helps you understand why that person holds that belief. You could expand your view of the world. You could provide a new perspective or paradigm. You can't assume that what you learn will feel positive. You can't. But it might help you find common ground. Hopefully, the surprise leads to deeper, more fulfilling relationship. So, what do you do with a checking pin? Well, you notice on the model, there was a circle that said facilitating behaviors. By this I mean, you want to be able to say things, or have your body say things that help the speaker get closer to saying what they really mean. If there's any doubt, you know, check what the speaker is saying. There's lots of ways to do that. Simple ones. Ask if you can paraphrase what they said and see whether you're getting it okay. Or ask the speaker to review. Do it over again. You know, make sure you're asking, make sure you're getting it. You know, if you want an extensive discussion of what these things might be, in my book, Listening to Models and Procedure, in chapter 8, I've got 13 different tactics for helping you do this. One of those tactics has 8 sub-tactics. I think you might find it very useful. Some of them are difficult to learn, but they are very valuable. And the other thing you need to do is reflect any significant emotions. And by significant, I mean, is that speaker paying more attention to that emotion than they are to anything else? And if they are, you need to reflect it. If you want to read my book, chapter 7, talk about how to respond depending on what the intensity of that emotion is. And you need to understand, emotion's primary. Emotion is primary. You got to deal with that before anything else. So those are the things that you might do to facilitate helping that person say what they want to say. And so now I've shared with you a few things that you can do to help yourself get more clear on what the meaning is in that person's head rather than just the meaning in your own head. Thanks for being with me. If you have questions, what are we going to do with this? You can certainly send me an email at rhalley.weber.edu. If there's time on this seminar, I'll be glad to answer questions while we're still on the air. Thank you very much. Have a good day.